Imagine, right, for just a second, being the absolute best in the entire world at what you do.
Afi.
Obviously, not just by some subjective vote or media spin, but the best by the cold, hard, undeniable math.
Right. Numbers don't lie.
Exactly. And that is exactly what we are getting into today. Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we're tearing into the history, the evolution, and the total legends of the NHL's Art Ross Trophy. Our mission here is to decode exactly what this specific, prestigious piece of hardware tells us about, peak human performance, the changing eras of professional hockey, and honestly, some of the most bizarre statistical anomalies to ever hit the ice.
Absolutely, because it really is the ultimate metric for offensive dominance. The Art Ross Trophy is the definitive crown, right? For the NHL player who just straight up leads the league in total points by the end of the regular season.
Right.
So it completely strips away all those debates about, who has the best two-way game or who's the best locker room guy. No, it is purely about production.
Yeah, strictly points. Goals plus assists.
Exactly. It honors the player who either buries the puck in the net or engineers the precise play that makes it happen and does it at a higher volume than literally anyone else on the planet.
Wow. And just to anchor this in the current moment, right? The reigning king right now is Nikita Kucherov. Down there with the Tampa Bay Lightning. He just grabbed this trophy for the third time in 2025, throwing up a massive 121 points. And he'd previously won it back in 2019 and 2024.
Incredible consistency.
Yeah, but to truly get the weight of what guys like Kucherov or Connor McDavid are pulling off today, we have to look at the foundation of the award itself. So, okay, let's unpack this. Art Ross. Because it's so easy to just read the name and forget that it belonged to an actual pioneer, right? A guy who physically shaped the sport. Art Ross wasn't just some suit in a front office writing a check for some silver.
Oh, far from it. Arthur Howie Art Ross was a foundational architect of the sport as we know it today. He was a highly successful player, ended up being inducted into the Hockey Hall of Fame, actually, for his time on the ice. Then later became this legendary general manager and head coach. Most notably, he built the early Boston Bruins into a total powerhouse. He presented this trophy to the NHL way back in 1947, but his contribution to scoring goes so much deeper than just, donating a piece of metal. He fundamentally changed the geometry of the game.
See, this is one of my favorite historical details. It's wild. He literally altered the physical object the game is played with. Before Art Ross, pucks were incredibly unpredictable. Just basically these flat slabs of vulcanized rubber that would bounce, roll up on their edges, skip over sticks. Just chaotic. Ross designed the official NHL puck by giving it slightly beveled or chamfered edges.
Right. And what's really fascinating here is the massive ripple effect of that one seemingly minor engineering tweak.
Right.
By beveling the edges of the puck, Ross drastically reduced the friction when the puck is flat on the ice. But even more importantly, he prevented it from constantly catching an edge and bouncing around like a tennis ball.
Right.
That tiny alteration in geometry allowed players to actually cup the puck with the blade of their stick. So boom, it birthed the entire modern era of stick handling and precision passing. So if we connect this to the bigger picture, Ross was this visionary who was just obsessed with puck control and playmaking, which makes it incredibly fitting that the trophy honoring the ultimate master over that puck bears his name.
Yeah, that perfectly sets the stage. The very first winner to take home the Art Ross Trophy at the end of that 1947-48 season was Elmer Lack of the Montreal Canadiens, and he took it with 61 points, which, okay, is a phenomenal season for that era. But it's almost comical to look at that number now, because when you track this award through the decades, you hit an era where the math simply breaks. I'm talking about the periods from 1981 all the way to 2001. 2 entire decades. During that 20-year span, only 3 men won this trophy.
Three guys. It's a monopolization of a major sporting award that you simply do not see anywhere else. For 20 straight years, the Art Ross Trophy essentially lived in the private collections of Wayne Gretzky, Mario Lemieux, and Jaromir Jagr. Think about the collateral damage of that streak. Entire generations of Hall of Fame caliber forwards entered the NHL, played their prime years, and retired without ever having a realistic shot at the scoring title, because those 3 were operating in a completely different statistical universe. It wasn't until Jerome Expella, over with the Calgary Flames, won it in 2002 that the duopoly was finally broken.
And the undisputed king of that era is, of course, Wayne Gretzky, the great one. Gretzky won the Art Ross Trophy a record 10 times. 7 of those were completely consecutive. And to put the sheer volume of his production into perspective against Elmer Lack's 61 points, in the 1981-82 season, Gretzky won it with 212 points.
Oh, incredible.
Then a few years later, in 85-86, he pushed it to 215 points. He broke the 200-point barrier 4 separate times. To translate that kind of dominance, It would be like a modern baseball player hitting 110 home runs in a single season and then doing it 3 more times just to prove it wasn't a fluke.
Right. But we have to remember that explosion of offense didn't happen in a vacuum. The 1980s were a perfect storm for someone with Gretzky's hockey IQ. You had an era where goaltenders were still largely playing traditional stand-up styles, wearing those heavy waterlogged pads, and relying on reaction rather than the modern, technically precise butterfly style. Combine that goaltending environment with Gretzky's unprecedented vision. Specifically, his strategy of setting up behind the opponent's net an area appropriately dubbed Gretzky's office, and you get numbers that will likely never be touched again. He essentially weaponized the ice in a way no defense was prepared to handle.
Yeah, totally. He's also the only player in the history of the award to win it while playing for more than one team.
Hmm.
He dominated with the Edmonton Oilers and then kept right on dominating after the massive trade to the Los Angeles Kings.
Mhm.
But the leaderboard directly behind him is just a masterclass in elite company. Gordie Howe and Mario Lemieux each hold 6 Art Ross titles. Phil Esposito, Jaromir Jagr, and modern phenom Connor McDavid all sit right there with 5 wins each.
And it's definitely worth analyzing how this individual brilliance tends to cluster, right? Creating entire team dynasties built around high-octane offense. The Pittsburgh Penguins hold the absolute record for franchise dominance with 15 Art Ross wins. That is a continuous passing of the torch from Lemieux to Jagr and later to Sidney Crosby and Evgeny Malkin. The Edmonton Oilers are right on their heels with 13 wins, heavily fueled by the Gretzky years, and now the modern McDavid and Leon Draisaitl era. Then following them, you have the Montreal Canadiens and the Chicago Blackhawks tied with 9 wins apiece.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting, though. We typically expect this trophy to go to the elite centermen or the explosive wingers, the guys whose sole professional mandate is to generate offense. But the history of the Art Ross is peppered with these incredible outliers who completely shattered the mold. And the ultimate rule breaker has to be Bobby Orr.
Oh, absolutely. Bobby Orr didn't just break the mold, he redefined the defensive position entirely. Traditionally, defensemen are structurally deployed to suppress the opposition, break up the cycle, clear the zone. They are not expected to lead the entire league in points. Yet, Bobby Orr won the scoring title twice. In 1970 and 1975 with the Boston Bruins. He remains the only defenseman in NHL history to ever accomplish this. He possessed this unmatched skating ability that allowed him to not just join the offensive rush, but to literally lead it end to end and still recover defensively.
Yeah, and that 1970 season for Orr might genuinely be the greatest single individual campaign in the history of professional hockey.
Yeah.
He didn't just win the Art Ross, he captured 4 individual awards simultaneously. He took home the Art Ross as the scoring champion, the Hart Trophy as the league's most valuable player, the Norris Trophy as the top defenseman, and the Conn Smythe Trophy as the MVP of the Stanley Cup playoffs. Just a total undisputed takeover of the sport.
A clean sweep of every major accolade available to him. And if we are talking about unique sweeps, we have to examine Stan Mikita of the Chicago Blackhawks. Mikita is a 4-time Art Ross winner, but his legacy includes this fascinating outlier, the Triple Crown. He is the only player in NHL history to win the Art Ross, the Hart Trophy, and the Lady Byng Trophy, which, remember, is awarded for sportsmanship and gentlemanly conduct, all in the same season. And incredibly, he did it in back-to-back years, in 1966-67 and 1967-68.
The juxtaposition of those specific awards is wild to me. Other legends like Gretzky, Bobby Hull, and Martin St. Louis have won all 3 of those awards at various points across their entire careers, but nobody other than Mikita has ever captured all 3 at the exact same time. You have to be the most lethal offensive weapon on the ice, the most highly valued player to your franchise, and somehow the most disciplined, polite guy out there taking virtually no penalty minutes. It's a paradox. You're destroying the opposition season, but you're doing it with impeccable manners.
Exactly. It requires a remarkable psychological balance. To maintain that level of intense competitive drive required to lead the league in scoring, while simultaneously exhibiting the absolute emotional restraint needed to win the Lady Byng. It's a testament to Mikita's unique character.
We also see some fantastic demographic shifts in the history of the award. For decades, the Art Ross was completely monopolized by Canadian players. Jaromir Jagr, hailing from the Czech Republic, broke that mold and set the record for the most wins by a non-Canadian with his 5 titles. But it's easy to assume this award has a heavy North American footprint, which makes this next stat completely flip the script. Patrick Kane is the only Oniwi American-born player to ever win the Art Ross Trophy. Just one. He did it back in 2016.
Which is a striking statistic when you consider the immense impact of the U.S. National Team Development Program and the sheer volume of elite American talent in the modern NHL. It highlights just how deep the Canadian roots of the sport truly run, even as the game has globalized. The demographic data also gives us a fascinating window into the extremes of human biology and athletic longevity. The ages of these winners show us that peak performance can manifest at completely different stages of life using completely different tools.
Exactly. Because looking at the absolute youngest end of the spectrum, you have Sidney Crosby. In 2007, Crosby won the Art Ross at the age of 19. That didn't just make him the youngest scoring champion in NHL history, it made him the youngest scoring champion in any major North American professional sport. You're talking about a teenager, barely old enough to buy a lottery ticket, mathematically outperforming grown men who have been mastering the league for a decade. He relied on pure, explosive talent, generational vision, and an unmatched lower body strength to dominate.
And the only other players to join Crosby in winning multiple Art Ross trophies before turning 21 are Connor McDavid and Wayne Gretzky.
But contrast that explosive teenage energy with Martin St. Louis. At almost twice Sidney Crosby's age, St. Louis became the oldest player to ever capture the Art Ross, winning it at the age of 37 during the 2012-13 season.
Right. St. Louis wasn't relying on the raw, limitless energy of a 19-year-old. He relied on elite veteran conditioning, unparalleled hockey IQ, and the ability to adapt his game as his physical tools aged. What's even more remarkable is that he won his first title in 2004 and his second in 2013. That 9-year gap is the longest stretch between scoring titles for any player in history. It speaks volumes about the sheer grit required to reinvent yourself and stay at the absolute pinnacle of a grueling physical sport for a decade.
The contrast between a 19-year-old prodigy and a 37-year-old tactician proves there's no single blueprint for dominance. And speaking of unique blueprints, we have to talk about Henrik and Daniel Sedin. They're the only siblings in history to win the award, doing it in consecutive years for the Vancouver Canucks. Henrik won it in 2010 with 112 points, and his twin brother Daniel won it the very next year in 2011 with 104 points.
Right. And the Sedin twins operated with a shared brain style of play that the league had never seen before and will likely never see again. They utilized a cycling game that looked almost telepathic, throwing blind no-look passes off the boards directly onto each other's tape. It's incredibly telling that in 2010, Henrik won the scoring title largely as a playmaker, racking up an astonishing 83 assists, many of them feeding Daniel, and then the very next year they flipped the script and Daniel took the crown. Having back-to-back scoring titles stay not just in the same franchise but under the exact same family roof is an unbreakable anomaly.
And if we're talking about unbreakable anomalies, Joe Thornton's 2005-06 season is the pinnacle of front office chaos. Thornton starts the year playing for the Boston Bruins. Midway through the season, in a blockbuster move, he gets traded to the San Jose Sharks. He packs his bags, moves across the continent, learns a completely new offensive system, gels with brand new line mates, and proceeds to go on an absolute tear. He finishes the year with 125 points to win the Art Ross. The NHL officially attributes the win to the San Jose Sharks, since that's the sweater he was wearing at the end of the year. But technically, it also makes him the seventh Bruin to win the award. Thornton remains the only player to ever win the trophy while playing for two different teams in a single season.
It perfectly illustrates the organized chaos of the league. You can uproot your entire life and career midway through November, and yet if your playmaking ability is that elite, you can still outproduce every other player on the continent.
So we've covered the runaway victors, the 200-point blowouts, the defensemen, and the teenagers. But what happens when the math jams up? After 82 grueling games of professional hockey, dealing with injuries, slumps, and line shuffles, what happens when two players are sitting at a dead heat? When they're perfectly tied in points, how does the league decide who gets the hardware?
This is where the league's underlying philosophy really comes into focus. The NHL has a very strict, three-tiered set of tiebreaker rules for the Art Ross Trophy. Rule number 1. The trophy goes to the player with the most goals. Because points are the sum of goals and assists, this rule clearly dictates that when push comes to shove, the league inherently values the physical act of putting the puck in the net over assisting the play.
Right. And if they had the exact same number of points, Andy, the exact same number of goals, it comes down to efficiency, right? Rule number 2 is the player who played fewer games. If player A scored 100 points in 80 games and player B needed all 82 games to reach 100 points, player A achieved the identical result in less time, dealing with less ice time.
Precisely. It rewards the higher points per game average. But the third and final tiebreaker is the true nuclear option. If two players are tied in points, tied in goals, and played the exact same number of games, the Art Ross Trophy is awarded to the player who scored the first goal of the season.
The opening night timestamp. It's such a wildly specific metric. And the crazy thing is, These tiebreakers aren't just theoretical. They've actually had to deploy them 3 times in NHL history.
Mhm.
In the 1961-62 season, Bobby Hull tied Andy Bathgate with 84 points. In the 1979-80 season, Marcel Dion tied Wayne Gretzky with 137 points. And in the 1994-95 season, which was shortened to 48 games due to a labor lockout, hence the lower numbers, Jaromir Jagr tied Eric Lindros with 70 points.
And in all three of those historical cases, the deadlock was resolved by that very first tiebreaker, the player with the most goals. Bobby Hull had 50 goals to Bathgate's 28, Marcel Dion edged out Gretzky with 53 goals to Wayne's 51, and Jagr had 32 goals to Lindros's 29.
I can't even imagine the heartbreak of that 1979-80 season. Losing out on the ultimate scoring title to Wayne Gretzky is one thing. Everyone lost to Gretzky.
Yeah.
But Gretzky losing the Art Ross to Dion by just 2 goals after an 80-game marathon, that is a brutal margin.
It is, and this raises an important question regarding a striking philosophical contrast within the NHL's own award structure. The Art Ross Trophy is absolute. It demands a singular champion. It will parse down through goal differentials, games played, and even opening night timestamps just to crown one undisputed winner.
Yeah.
However, the Maurice Rocket Richard Trophy, which is awarded specifically for the most goals in a season, has no tiebreaker whatsoever.
Wow.
If 2 players tie for the league lead in goals, they both get their names engraved on the trophy. It's fascinating that the league allows for shared glory when it comes to pure goal scoring, but insists on an absolute Highlander style. There can be only one mentality when it comes to overall offensive production.
That is such a great distinction. The Rocket Richard lets you share the podium, but the Art Ross forces you off of it. Looking at this entire journey, it is so clear that the Art Ross Trophy isn't just a list of names and numbers. It's a living timeline of hockey's evolution. It starts with Art Ross carving a bevel into a rubber puck so players could actually control it. It moves through the impossible mathematical monopolies of Gretzky and Lemieux, exploiting the stand-up goaltending of the 80s. It highlights Bobby Orr, changing the geometry of defense, and the Sedin twins operating on a shared frequency. It proves that geek excellence doesn't care if you're a 19-year-old phenom exploding onto the scene, or a 37-year-old veteran using pure grit to reinvent your game. Dominance takes 100 different forms.
It absolutely does. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, I want to leave you with a thought regarding that third and final tiebreaker rule. The league has never, in its entire history, had to use the third tiebreaker for the Art Ross. But mathematically, the possibility is always looming. I want you to imagine a future season where 2 players battle through an exhausting, physically punishing schedule. They play through bruised ribs, travel across multiple time zones, and fight through elite defensive schemes night after night. By the final buzzer in April, they are deadlocked. Exact same points, exact same goals, exact same number of games played. An entire year of blood, sweat, and absolute dedication would theoretically be decided by a random, unassuming shot that happened to trickle across the goal line on a Tuesday night back in early October. It is a powerful reminder of how the tiniest, earliest actions in any long-term endeavor, whether it's an NHL season or a massive project in your own life, can unexpectedly become the ultimate deciding factor months or even years down the road.
What a phenomenal way to frame it. Every single shift matters, from opening night to the final horn. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the numbers, the anomalies, and the undeniable math of the Art Ross Trophy. Keep exploring, keep questioning the stats, and remember to always look for the fascinating stories hiding right there in the data of the things you love. We'll catch you next time.